Ooh, heaven is a place on earth. What's up, sons? It's Blind Red with Son of a Tech once again, and behind me, we are mining Raptoreum on the Ryzen 9 5950X. Now, if you go online and you look up the overclocks for mining Raptoreum on the 5950X, you're pretty much going to see the idea that you turn off Precision Boost Overdrive, you do a manual overclock somewhere between 1.1 and 1.3 volts, and then somewhere between 3800 and 4400 megahertz. So essentially 3.8 gigahertz to 4.4 gigahertz, just, doing the math for you there, and basically letting it go from there. Now, obviously, they do point out the XMP profiles on your memory, which is going to be important as well. However, with the changes in the 5000 series Ryzen CPUs, you should be taking into consideration the possibility that a finely tuned Precision Boost Overdrive 2.0 may net you basically better hash rates at less power and lower temperatures, letting the processor itself manage essentially per algorithm what's going on. This wasn't true for the Ryzen 3000 series or 2000 series, primarily because the Precision Boost Overdrive was frankly not that good. With, of course, Precision Boost Overdrive 2.0, AMD made leaps and bounds catching up to, of course, Intel as far as the clocks go on single core, etc. And because Raptoreum does utilize multiple algorithms, what you'll find is over time, you're going to have a higher average hash rate from Precision Boost Overdrive 2.0. We're going to get into the details right after a word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is BT Miners. Purchasing mining equipment online can be dangerous. With all of the fake storefronts and scams, it can be hard to find a reliable source. That's why when BT Miners reached out for a channel sponsorship, I started by verifying that ordering and delivery went smoothly with a purchase of my own. If you are looking to purchase ASICs hardware from Bitcoin to Dogecoin miners, they are available for purchase on bt-miners.com. BT Miners is a trusted source by both ASICMinerValue.com and CryptoMiner.com. Follow the affiliate link in the description and use promo code FREESHIPPING2021 for free shipping on your order. Welcome back. So let's hop into the 5950X specifications first of all, and then we'll go from there. So, as you can see, I have the specifications pulled up, and what we have is a 16-core, 32-thread processor with a base clock of 3.4 gigahertz and a max boost clock of up to 4.9 gigahertz, not to be confused with a max all-core boost overclock, which would be somewhere between 4.4 and 4.6 gigahertz, depending on the silicon lottery. You have basically 8 megabytes of L2 cache, and most importantly, 64 megabytes of L3 cache. Now, specifically for Raptoreum, what matters more than almost anything else is going to be the amount of L3 cache on the processor. It loves L3 cache. And that is why you would see essentially not a huge bump between the Ryzen 5 5600 and the Ryzen 7 5800. While you do get a little bit more out of that 5800, it's not near as large of a difference going from the 5800 to the 5900, and why right now the 5900X is pretty much the sweet spot, or previously was the 3900X, but right now the 5900X, which we'll also have a link to, as well as the 5950X down below on Amazon, are pretty much what we're looking at for best price to performance. The 5900X right now for Black Friday is $479, so keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and continue on. You have a TDP of 105 watts. Now, this is something else that we need to talk about, because a lot of the builds that I'm seeing for Raptoreum are basically only using cheap motherboards. And while that is fine if we're talking about ROI, you should take into consideration that if you have good power delivery, you're not only going to essentially get better PBO 2.0 performance, which is going to be important, but you're also going to prevent more degradation due to voltage changes to the CPU and the regulation there, because the motherboard will have higher quality components to deliver that power that the processor is requesting. And this is going to be important for longevity of the system. And this is something that I talked about a little bit in the Crypto Mining Morning Show. But what you need to take into account is even on GPUs, which I've seen, and we'll talk about that in a different video, but especially on CPUs, what you have is degradation over time. And if you're running these things mining at 100%, just hammering away at any algorithm, over time it's going to degrade. Well, what happens when the processor degrades is essentially it's going to require more voltage to get the same hash rate and same overclocks that it did previously. So even if you're running at 1.1 volts at 3.8 gigahertz on the 5950X, over time, if you have poor power delivery, you can still degrade that processor, especially if there's spikes within that power delivery. So going for a budget motherboard is not necessarily what I would recommend. What I personally would look for, if we're talking about 5900X and the 5950X, is looking for a motherboard that at least has additional CPU power of not just a single 8-pin, but an additional 4-pin as well, totaling out, of course, to like a 12-pin total. On the particular motherboard we're using here, it's the ASRock Taichi B550, which is 2 additional 8-pin CPU powers, so it has really good clean power delivery. What this also allows you to do is tighten down that line load calibration level, where essentially it's going to keep that voltage consistent. These are important things when taking into consideration building a Raptoreum mining rig, especially for longevity of the system. And I wanted to make sure that that is very clear when we're talking about it. Now, this is on the TSMC 7nm FinFET manufacturing process. It will still be socket AM4, and it doesn't come with a thermal solution. So what we use for a thermal solution in this particular case, what we went ahead and used was a Noctua NHD15, and that is the big 140 millimeter fans. Now, this cooler is going to run you $100. But if you are in a mining farm and you are trying to cool a 5950X mining Raptoreum 24/7, now you guys might start being like, well, you know, it doesn't look as profitable as it did previously. And yeah, we're talking about having to get motherboards, having to get coolers, having to get memory for every single mining rig, as opposed to GPU mining where we could just throw a card on every single time. But that aside, let's go ahead and talk about the max operating temperature is going to be 90 degrees Celsius. In these tests, both at stock and using basically a straight overclock, right? We're just going 1.3 volts at 4400 in this particular case. When we were testing to see what the max would be, we were basically going over that max operating temperature, curiously enough. This was resolved a little bit by tuning in that line load calibration and tightening up those voltages where it wasn't spiking it, but this was a problem. With the PBO settings that I have set though, however, you will notice that we did not have the same issues. We maintained a lower TDP at max, and we maintained a lower TDP at the very lowest as well, only hitting 38 watts on some of the lighter algorithms, and then going up on the CPU package power to 140 watts, which is pretty interesting. So now that we've talked about the test bench a little bit, the memory is going to be 64 gigabytes of Corsair, clocked at Crucial Ballistics, clocked at 2666 megahertz. I would not recommend this. It's just what I had in the system at the time of testing. We are going to be doing specifically memory testing here shortly for Raptoreum and playing around with that, both for Ryzen 3000 as well as Ryzen 5000. Now, Ryzen 5000 in general doesn't have as much dependence on memory speed as Ryzen 3000. And this will be something that we'll have to cover in the future as we get into more and more testing. So what did we find as far as our averages and so on? This is actually super difficult to do. This was about 16 hours of testing, and I still think I need a lot more. Reason being is because basically I need to run not only the full tune, but I need to also run a full benchmark. In this case, I wasn't running the benchmark, I was running the full tune and then getting the average there and then moving on from there and trying to get it done as quickly as possible for different overclocking methods. Now that I know what the stable overclocks are, because each one of these was done for about 10 hours, now that I know what the stable overclocks are, I will run the benchmark mode and go from there. But let's go ahead and hop into the stock numbers for the 5950X. So if we're taking a look at the stock basically run with this particular setup on Raptoreum, we were looking at an average of about 4,151 hash a second, with the peak power going clearly into essentially the 150 watt to 160 watt range, with max temps on the CPU going as high as 90 degrees Celsius, which would then throttle the CPU, mind you, with a very good cooler. So this is kind of where you're at stock, and it's not ideal. So I started looking around, of course, for the options that people were doing on Raptoreum for the 5950X, and I saw the all-core. So we went ahead and tried an all-core overclock. This took about 3 or 4 tries before we got stable overnight, which was quite difficult, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And even then, we did get a really good hash rate, an average of 4,750, which was awesome. I was like, heck yeah. But there were times where we were hitting 221 watts. Let's go ahead and go into the BIOS settings for this, because I know people are trying to figure out, why are we hitting that high? And I'm still trying to figure out exactly why you hit that high in this particular setup, especially once you look at the PBO 2.0 numbers. I would expect PBO to go higher, but for whatever reason, at least on the ASRock motherboard, it starts pushing it way up on this particular algorithm. Now what you'll notice is we were sitting at 4.3 gigahertz all core pretty much all the time, which is pretty much where we were wanting to be. We were at 1.3 volts on the CPU core, and then we just had it set to 4400 in the BIOS. We went into the advanced tab in the AMD overclocking portion, and we went in there and we turned off Precision Boost Overdrive, rebooted the system, and went from there. Now, we could lower temperatures. We could, of course, lower the power consumption by turning the voltage down even more. However, the further and the further and further and further that we turn that voltage down, the lower our core clock is going to get. And then, of course, the lower our hash rates and our average hash rates are going to get. So where did we end up, right? Because now I'm sitting there going, well, what did I do when this launched for gaming? Because I remember playing around with all core overclocks and being like, this isn't working as well as previous Ryzen processors. So what's going on? What could we do to resolve this? And what I found was you could utilize the Precision Boost Overdrive Advanced menu to really basically tweak it into a position that basically increased the max performance while still keeping the wattages low, while you weren't utilizing the full breadth of the processor. So I decided to go back through some old videos and basically look it up and see what I had it set at. And here's basically what we ended up with. We went and set, of course, the manual overclock back to auto. So we got rid of the overclock, the manual overclock. Then we went into the advanced tab and we went into, of course, once again, that Precision Boost Overdrive option in the ASRock motherboard, and we selected advanced. Now here is where essentially we wanted to basically change a couple things. And what these changes are going to do is basically make it to where we have a curve that is optimized so that we aren't going way above, and then we still get the max performance. So the first step to this is going down to that curve optimizer and then setting it to negative and 15. Now your mileage may vary in this case, and that's going to be important to take note of. You could be basically needing to go all the way to negative 20, and that would be considered good, or you're having issues with different cores and you need to go down to 10 or 5. And that's pretty much what's going to happen. Essentially, if you're unstable, you're going to go lower, right? Negative 10, then negative 5, then no negative. And then if you're getting into having to go to positive on the curve optimizer, you most likely have experienced some sort of CPU degradation on your 5950X. And I'm sorry, this probably won't work for you at this point. So the next setting is going to be changing the max CPU boost clock override to plus 200 megahertz, which will allow it to go that extra 200 megahertz. And what you'll find, and what ends up being super interesting, is that you end up, after the 4 hours of testing, with an average of 5,440 hash a second, with a max power consumption of 141 watts, as opposed to that 200 from the all-core overclock, and a max temperature of 78 degrees Celsius. So not only have we reduced the temperatures, not only have we reduced the power consumption on average, but we've also increased our hash rate by leveraging Precision Boost Overdrive 2.0 and adjusting that curve optimizer to drop that voltage down by negative 15. This is super awesome and important to note when overclocking the Ryzen 5000 series for Raptoreum. Now, once again, I do need to basically emphasize that your mileage may vary with Precision Boost Overdrive 2.0. You will need to play with the curved optimizer, and depending on your motherboard, you will need to play with the max allowed boost to each core. In some cases, you can even go per core, and per core on the curve optimizer, one core could be like negative 25 and the next one could be negative 5. That goes even further into tweaking, which can drop your temperatures and all that even more. But I wanted to bring this to everybody's attention because as somebody who always has enjoyed overclocking processors and so on, I had already kind of played with this. And when I was reading all of the guides and stuff, I was like, why aren't they utilizing Precision Boost Overdrive 2.0? What's going on here? Now, why I think this is because most people were utilizing the 3900X to mine Raptoreum, and Precision Boost Overdrive was terrible for the 3900X. And it just goes to basically show that basically people were considering that Precision Boost Overdrive would be terrible for the 5000 series. Also, maybe not even realizing that there are advanced options that allow you to adjust that curve optimizer, which is going to reduce your voltages overall. And the reason this is also important with Raptoreum in particular is because we're talking about utilizing multiple algorithms. And because of that, these algorithms are going to change the demands on the processor, and the processor should be able to adapt to that. And that is why I think we see here the results that we ended up with. Let me know what you guys find with playing around with PBO 2.0. Let me know what you guys find with maybe upgrading your motherboard to having additional CPU powers as opposed to just a single 8-pin, especially for the 5800X and up, technically, because of that TDP. 5800X I actually have running on a single 8-pin. That one seems to be fine. 5900X and 5950X, you will notice a significant difference in, of course, that performance just overall, even at stock, right? Because I did hear like people being like, well, how did you get that hash up so much on the stock? Mine's at blah, 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 it's lower. And that is probably more than likely going to be that power delivery just being cleaner and better on the ASRock Taichi B550. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys find down below. Once again, these are really quick and dirty averages. What I need to do as a content creator is go back in and do more testing. We have total, the system's been running like 30 hours, right? About 10 hours per. What I need it to do, right, is run the benchmarks, redo it all again, and basically come to you guys with even more evidence for this. But this was quick and dirty find, and I wanted to share it as quick as possible because you guys may be leaving a lot of performance on the table here. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I will see you next Tuesday. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to see more. Also, you can check out this playlist for more content talking about cryptocurrency.